Which is on, which is off.
Aaron, you're not. Aaron.
Yes, sir. We're live, by the way.
I understand that. I would like to take that background picture off. That was for something else that I had done, and I'm not proficient enough to do that. Can you help? Laughing at me, Ledbetter. I see you.
On the yeah, I'll shoot you a text here real quick. Hold on.
Okay. Old dial-up is signing in.
I have a question if anybody can hear me.
I can hear you.
Great. This is Todd Rice. I'm an applicant on one of the Planning Commission items approved last night, and I'm logged in, but I don't see myself on the video, and I was concerned that I wasn't going to be present. So,
Yeah, you're here. We can hear you loud and clear in the council chambers.
great. Thank you. I'll mute until I'm asked a question if that happens.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, Mary.
Hey.
Hey, Mary.
Hey.
Good evening, everyone. We are ready to start our meeting. As you know, we always begin each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, I'm going to ask Brett Carroll, the CEO of Conway Corporation, if he'd lead us in prayer.
Pray with me, please. Good evening, Father. Lord, I thank you for this time. Lord, I just want to lift up our country to you, our state, and especially our community, Lord. I pray for our city leaders. Lord, I pray for wisdom, for insight, Lord, as they go about taking care of city business, Lord. I pray for each and every one of them. Pray for their safety. I pray for the safety of our city employees, Lord, the work that they have to do, the essential services that they have to provide to our citizens, Lord. I just lift them up to you and pray for, again, for their safety. Lord, I pray for this meeting. I pray that you'd be in charge of all that we do. Lord, all these things I ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we'll now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call roll, please? Oh,
Mr. Hawkins,
Here.
Mr. Pruitt,
Here.
Miss Mel,
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Here.
Miss Smith,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Miss Isby.
Here.
okay. You should have received copies of the March 10th and April 14th, 2020 City Council minutes. Any corrections, changes, or comments?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve these minutes as submitted. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. All right. First up, we have from our reports, we have our monthly financial report ending February and March 2020. Mr. Winningham, we will turn this over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Shall I leave my camera off? Y'all,
You can turn it on.
Oh.
I'd like to see you, Mr. Winningham. Thank you.
Here I am. Good evening, everybody. I think everybody's had a chance to look at February, so I won't really talk much about that, especially since we're already a month past February. If anybody just has anything specific from that month that they want to ask or talk about, does anybody have anything? Okay,
Okay.
we'll move on to March.
Okay, go on.
March was a good month for us, sales tax wise. It was up 9.1% over March of 19, which is for January sales. So through 3 months, we're up almost 7% in sales tax revenue. We're up 6.8. That's a good sign. And the not so good signs, looking at revenue, have been notified by Conway Court that our franchise fees could take a significant hit this year due to the factories being closed down, not using near as much electricity as they usually do. Their initial projection for that number is about 245,000. Is out of a $3.5 million budgeted number of revenue. That is, any way you look at it, $250,000 is a significant hit to take. And then we're also projecting that our sales tax revenue could potentially take up to about a $500,000 hit, maybe a little bit more, just depending on how things shake out. So for the general fund as a whole for this year, we could be looking at about a $750,000 gap to try to fill with budget cuts or whatever means we can come up with to make that. Now, looking at the expenditures so far, Mayor Castleberry put in a spending freeze on us earlier in March. So we were kind of thinking ahead and Mayor, if you got anything you want to add to that, feel free to, but the best I recall, the spending freeze was just looking ahead to this event, knowing so.
Yeah, as you all remember, we all spoke about it. We've had a spending freeze since the first week in March, and realistically, if it's just other than personnel cost, if it's not tires, batteries, and fuel, we've pretty well cut it out. Even though we do have great numbers for January, I think Mr. Winningham, I think you will all agree that when we start seeing our numbers for specifically March, April, and possibly even May, I think we're going to see a significant downturn. So that's why y'all been asked to work with the department heads to take a look at their budgets and to let's all get together here. Probably once we get past this, we're going to need to all sit down in a regular scheduled council meeting, probably with a committee meeting beforehand, and make some pretty tough decisions. But we'll cross that bridge when we finally reach the other side, whenever that is.
Sir, and you can see the drop off in spending already just in this month of March. If you compare our expenditures in the general fund can kind of be a little bit skewed because of the remodel of the new city hall that everybody can see there on the screen where the city clerk and city attorney are. So if you don't count the admin department, if you just look at finance down and compare 2019 to 2020, our spending is down about $375,000. So that's a good sign. I think that shows that our departments are complying with the spending freeze and, trying to save as much money as we can headed into these next few months.
And an additional step I've asked the department heads to take is on our overtime, instead of paying overtime out, put some of our salaried people to work, taking up the slack.
Yes, sir. And the spending freeze is citywide. So, our street fund could see a potential hit in revenues as well. The state tax turnback, people are not driving near as much as they are. So gas stations aren't selling as much fuel. So that fuel sales tax is going to be going down. But their spending is down also. They've 2019 versus 2020, down about $60,000 in spending. And then sanitation fund, its revenues could see a potential hit as well because we've essentially shut down any drop-off services out there. But if you look at their spending, their overall spending is up versus last year, but that's due to capital purchases that were already sort of in the pipeline, so to speak, before the COVID-19 shutdown. So looking at the airport fund, their spending is down as well. It's down about $18,000 compared to same month last year. And revenue wise, I don't think, that's, I don't know if Mr. Bell is on here. But, I think we could assume that we would see a revenue drop there as well, just because of the overall slowdown of the economy. But we still don't really yet have any projections or any numbers for what that might be. But overall, citywide spending is down, and we're doing the best we can headed into these next few months to try to weather the storm.
Any questions for Mr. Winningham?
No, sir.
No. I make a motion to approve the monthly financials.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financial report ending in February and March of 2020. If there's no further discussion, Mr. Garrett, would you call for the vote, please?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
7-0. Thank you, Mr. Winningham.
Yes, sir.
Next, we have a public hearing to discuss the closing of a portion of a drainage easement, Lot 27, in the Matthews Meadow subdivision. Mr. Frank Shaw is the applicant, and Mr. James Walden, would you open up discussion, please? I'll now declare this public hearing open.
Yes, the closure of this easement relates to the relocation of a detention pond for Matthews Meadows. So they had lots 27 and 28. A portion of both of those lots was utilized for a large detention pond. Mr. Shaw has gotten an agreement and constructed a new detention pond to the south of there, which and then filled these in. We've got a plat that is outstanding that we got to get file with it. But the intent of this is to convert those from drainage, which they have been filled in, to developable lots.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Walden? Okay. Would anyone else like to speak for or against this closing of a portion of a drainage easement on Lot 27 Matthews Meadow subdivision?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes, what Mr. Walden says is exactly correct. Those lots will be taken as lots by Roush Coleman and part of Matthews Meadows. If approved, we expect to close on those within 30 to 40 days, 30 days probably. And what we've done is move the detention pond off-site to another location. It'll beautify the subdivision. It will rid the subdivision of the standing water, the drainage issue. It'll beautify it, and we think it's in the best interest of the subdivision to do this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak for or against? Okay, we will now close this public hearing. At this time, council, I will take a motion for an ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. I'm assuming, Mary, that was to waive the three readings? All
Yes,
right.
sorry. it is.
Someone, we have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Move for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance closing the drainage easement on lot 27 in Matthews Meadows subdivision. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This will be ordinance 02017. Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Are you sure?
Next up, we have our standing committees, and we will be starting with community development. Mr. Hawkins, we'll turn this over to you.
All right, from out on Salem Road, here we go. First item on the agenda is a resolution requesting the Faulkner County Tax Collector place some liens against various properties for expenses incurred by the city. The first location is 335 Davis. At this point in time, I would normally ask if there's anybody in attendance to talk about this, but I can't see downtown. I don't think there's anybody in y'all's room. So
Nope.
we have a resolution for this item, and it's going to be resolution R20. And Mr. Garrett,
17.
thank you very much. R2017 for this one.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution in the amount of $272.25 at 335 Davis Street. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next location, Mr. Mayor, is at 1830 Mill Street, where the city has incurred $336.33 of expenses. And we have a resolution for this item. It's resolution R2018.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to place a lien against property located at 1830 Mill Street in the amount of $336.33. Any further discussion? Anyone like to speak for or against that? All right, Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
And the final item here, Mr. Mayor, is the address of 11 Azalea Loop. We have a $1,006.81 bill for work that's been done by the city. This is resolution R2019.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution to place a lien on property at 11 Azalea Loop in the amount of $1,006.81. Is there anyone online that would like to speak out for this property?
I do have a question.
I'm sorry?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
The photos were attached and it honestly looks like a tornado went through there. Do we know what the situation was here?
I do not. Missy, do you know?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
The gentleman that had lived in that trailer had been moved to a nursing assisted living facility, and it looked like the trailer was being repoed, and they just took everything inside and just threw it out.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Terrible.
Well, I'm glad we got this and got it cleaned up. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks, Missy.
Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Missy. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve the nomination of Reggie Rose to the Conway Corporation Board of Directors, and I move that we approve that nomination.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the nomination of Reggie Rose to the, this is the Reggie Rose we all know.
It is, and love.
There's a good man. The Conway Corporation Board of Directors for a 7-year term. Any discussion? And Mr. Carroll is here if y'all have any questions for him. Okay. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Let's see, Mr. Mayor, hang on. Next item is an ordinance appropriating funds for landscape improvement for the Conway Public Art Board. And we have an ordinance to read for this. It will be ordinance O-2018.
Make
Make
a
a
motion.
motion.
We waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance approving landscaping for the Public Art Board. And this will be, as we said on this is for the Public Art, would like to provide landscaping around the Rabbit Revolution located there at Parkway in Maine. So got any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt.
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve the removal of inventory from fixed assets for the Planning and Development Department. And I'm sad to see this one go because it's the first hybrid vehicle that I think we bought for the city of Conway.
Yep.
It was. I make a motion, we dispose of this property, this asset. Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve the removal of inventory from fixed assets, this vehicle, the hybrid for the Planning and Development Department. I would like to ask the council if there's any of our nonprofits that y'all would like to see this vehicle go to. We could do that. We've done that in the past. I know that Hugh Austin is connected to a group that takes vehicles, but when we've given those to the past, so if we have another group that would like to take the vehicle, then are you guys okay with that?
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance accepting and appropriating donation funds for the Conway Tree Board. We've got $5,000 that is on the line here, and we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance O-2019.
Make
Make a motion, we waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Walden, would you like to kind of explain what this is for?
Yes, this is the donation from Conway Corporation.
We'll take it.
I make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance of accepting the $5,000 appropriation donation funds for the Conway Tree Board from Conway Corporation. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Bisbee,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mark, are you
Come on, Mark.
there? Wake
I'm
up.
here. Can you hear me?
Wake up.
Mark and I
Can y'all
talked.
hear me?
Yeah, Mark and I talked sometime before daylight this morning, so I know he's tired. Mr. Hawkins.
Let's see. Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone some property. This property is 6.83 acres. It's located at 260 to 310 South Harkrider Street. Presently, it's zone C3, and the requested zoning is an RU1 zoning. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on April 20th. And at that time, the commission voted that the request be sent to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And with that, I will move that we pass ordinance 02020.
Make a motion
Second.
with 3 readings.
Thank you for that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Walden, people who are watching, would you explain the difference here from a C3 to a RU1?
Yes. So C3, that's a sort of a corridor commercial type of commercial district. So what you would see along a lot of Harkrider. The zoning is a little bit out of sync with the way that the site has been used and the way it's constructed. It's really in a lot of ways an industrial site. It's set vacant for probably about 10 years. We've got Arkansas Fence and Guardrail wanting to move their operations to Conway. And so this is a really great beneficial thing. This item and the next item are both related. So it's basically going from a commercial zoning to an industrial zoning.
Great.
Do y'all have any questions for Mr. Walden? Okay. We've had a motion to waive the 3
Make a
readings.
motion for approval.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone
Mark, you with us,
6.83
man?
acres.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got
I
you,
can
man.
hear you. It's delayed.
You're running in slow motion. Any
That's the way I roll.
further discussion?
Slow.
Mr. Garrett.
Pruitt, Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Ms. Mel,
Sure.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. That finally passed 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Walden. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is, as Mr. Walden has said, is kind of an associated deal with one we just passed. Consider to approve a conditional use permit to allow a warehouse in the RU1 district that we just rezoned, that property at 260 to 310 South Harkrider. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting last night and
Yes.
voted at that time to forward to the City Council with a recommendation
Wow.
of approval with 8 conditions. You can read those or I can read them. I'll do either one.
Go ahead, Mr. Hawkins.
I will do that then. Outside uses shall be limited to storage of materials, goods, and equipment. Such outside uses should be screened and shielded from the view from adjacent property and public right of way. Number 2 is landscape screening is required along the street frontage at 1 canopy tree per 15 feet. Number 3, any new lighting installed shall conform to standards set forth in Article 1101 of the zoning code. Number 4, applicant is required to improve access drive and parking area to conform to standards set forth in Articles 501 and 1101 of the zoning code. Number 5, the applicant shall provide plans of Article 1101 of the zoning code indicating all proposed improvements, including parking and circulation, fencing, loading, and storage areas. Number 6, staff shall be authorized to impose reasonable conditions. And that's our staff, by the way. Shall be allowed to impose reasonable conditions upon approval of the required development review application to mitigate impacts on adjacent properties. Number 7, any expansions or additions to the structures or on-site, as well as any changes to the use, shall require an amended or new conditional use permit. And finally, failure to comply with the conditions imposed could result in the conditional use permit being revoked. I'm assuming that if they're going to do the first 7, that we're good to go on number 8. And with that, I move that we grant this conditional use permit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt a conditional use permit to allow a warehouse in the RU1 zone for property located at 260 and 310 South Hargrove Street with the 8 conditions that Mr. Hawkins read off. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
And the final item that I've got, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property at 645 Exchange Avenue. It currently is an I3 classification. The requested zoning is an I1 classification. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting last night and voted that the request be forwarded to the City Council with a recommendation of approval. And we have ordinance to read for this item. It is ordinance O-2021.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second, but I have it as ordinance 2020. Is that correct, Mike?
No, I have it as 21.
21?
21,
Okay,
yeah.
I stand corrected. Okay,
2020 was item 6, Ms. Isby.
all right. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Mr. Walden, would you like to give us an explanation to this, please, sir?
Yes. So as the Harkrider area is transitioning from commercial, we got some industrial there that wants to move in. And this portion of Exchange on that area, it's south towards Dave Ward Drive, we're seeing more demand for commercial development and in some of those southern portions of the industrial park. And so indicative of a problem generally in that area is that there are a lot of sales and service uses that are wanting, to have some sort of commercial function. The I3 zoning that exists there is really, really very limiting. And so the applicant has sales. They're wanting to add a firearms dealer to that. And so we were contacted by the ATF regarding this in review of the current activity that's going on in site and accommodating the activity that the applicant is wanting to do on site as well. Staff directed them towards an I1 zone. The comprehensive plan indicates industrial in this area. However, that I1 is a less intense industrial that also allows some of the retail functions. It is next door to the co-op, which is a sort of a long-term retail function as well.
And the property is located next to the co-op, as you said, and an ATF co-op's ATF approved retailer of firearms. That's correct. This property butts that. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone this property located at 645 Exchange Avenue from I3 to I1. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt, Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. You're very welcome.
Next is our Public Service Committee, and tonight we have Mr. Steve Ibbotson. He wants to talk to us about purchasing a forklift for the Parks and Recreation Department. We'll let you know this is not general fund money, since we've already had that discussion at the front, but Mr. Ibbotson, I will let you explain. Please step up, sir.
Yes, sir. I hope you all can hear me tonight.
Yes.
Thank you, Aaron. This was budgeted in our 2020 budget for out of A&P funds, as the mayor mentioned. Bryce and I bid this out, and we're asking you to approve the bid for Weiss at 24-122-9009.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution to purchase a forklift for the Parks Recreation Department from A&P funds. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This will be resolution R 2020. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Ibbotson.
Thank you, sir.
We have Conway Fire Chief Mike Winter, who wants to discuss changing reclassifying a position within the Conway Fire Department. Chief Winter.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, we have a Captain David Grove. 25 years, and probably about 15 years of that he has served as our apparatus fleet maintenance technician, and he is retiring at the end of May. And we don't have any firefighters that want to take over that position. And so we're asking to change this position from uniform to a civilian non-uniform position. And fill it there.
Okay, that will actually save a little money on the pension end. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, sir. This Captain Groves will be retiring at a captain's pay, and this will be moving to a lower pay grade since we're going to a civilian. And so, yes, this year it looks like right off the bat, possibly $20,000 this year.
Okay, thank you, Chief Winter. And I'd like to comment on Captain Groves. This was actually the brainchild of Mark Ledbetter when he was at the fire department, and David just had the ability and the mechanical ability to get in there and work on the fire trucks. He got all kinds of certifications from Pierce, and not only is David a good mechanic, he's a good man. He will be sorely missed. And Chief Ledbetter, you pulled off a pretty good one there.
Yes, yes.
I make a motion.
Do every once in a while.
We've got to get your computer fixed.
I make a motion.
I'm just
to
a
waive the 3
slow
readings.
talker.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
I make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance
Second.
and the clause.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance O 2022. Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Ms. Mel. Ms. Mel,
You're on mute.
She's gone.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
and the emergency clause, Mr. Pruitt,
West.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Okay, those both pass 8-0. Thank you, Chief Winter, and tell Captain Groves we appreciate the job he's done.
Well,
Our next item would be new business, but the city attorney has asked that we pull it tonight. It will be on the council agenda next Tuesday night. So that is all the business we have tonight. We'd like to pass on that the sanitation department has reopened for taking yard waste. So all you men and women from Conway and kids have been cleaning storage rooms and garages and attics. We're open for business. So,
Is that just yard waste or?
Everything's open with the exception of the recycling right now. And that will come on board next.
Great.
Great. Good to hear.
Any further discussion for tonight?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Bye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And
Bye,
thank you to the IT
everybody.
department.
Bye.
See y'all.
Good to see y'all.
Y'all too.
Y'all be
Bye.
safe.